When asked whether I prefer protagonist or antagonist, more often than not, I choose antagonist. Villains and anti-villains have always fascinated me and are typically more enamoring than their altruistic opposites. Their ruthlessness is an obstacle the heroes must overcome in order to see a resolution. Without a formidable villain, there'd be no impediments for the heroes, and their happily ever after would feel as obligatory as a participation blue ribbon. A popular practice in storytelling is analyzing the villain's past to uncover the catalyst for their wicked ways. The incidents are usually tragic, creating a Freudian excuse. Done well, this can spawn a genuine cry for the devil pathos that builds character developments for the fiend. An undesirable byproduct of this is villain decay, where an ominous foe is demoted into a pushover and loses what made him or her so charismatic and formidable. The more heartless a villain, the trickier they are to exonerate. Imagine a fanfic wherein the Emperor breaks down in front of Luke and discloses that his hate stems from being bullied as a child, and he resolves to atone by opening a Jedi training school. How about a sobbing Voldemort explaining that he had been a gentle child, but his turning point was when a Muggle-born embarrassed him during his first day at Hogwarts? Sauron unites Middle-earth with peaceful tolerance? Are you buying these scenarios as believable? Didn't think so. Alas, this practice isn't reserved solely for fan works. It could show in canon too. A recent occurrence was the Red Queen in 2016's Through the Looking Glass. Her jealousy towards her sister caused her to rule as a murderous tyrant, and the single act that quelled her fury was a hug from said sister. Aw, isn't that cute? I'm sure her victims would agree, if they were still alive. 1959's Maleficent is the mistress of vitriol. Without a breath of hesitation, she sentences newborn Aurora to death because the parents didn't invite her to the christening. She then obsessively hunts the princess for 16 years and consummates the curse upon finding her. Her revenge unsated, she tries imprisoning Philip for 100 years and attempts to kill him in the form of a hellish dragon. She gets her comeuppance by way of a sword piercing her heart. Disney could not condone such brutality from the titular character in the 2014 reboot. The answer was to hamstring the Dark Fairy by changing her into a gentle protector and sympathetic Sue, who, at the zenith of her rage, places a reversible sleeping spell on Aurora, but develops a maternal love for the princess over the years of supervising her. Which is nauseating. In making her benign, she was deprived of what made her strong. No longer can she transport herself with magic. She has to ride a horse or walk. She's hailed as protector of the moors, and while there are a couple of instances showing her knocking foes back with an unseen force, she primarily relies on other creatures to battle on the front lines. She can't even initiate her master stroke of morphing into the dragon, and the honor goes to her crow servant. As if adopting such a mighty form would cancel out the niceness 2014 Disney foisted onto her. As if obliging characters mustn't exhibit strength, resistance, or self-sufficiency. The common thread connecting the preceding examples is Maleficent has to depend on others to achieve most feats. How is this progressive update and improvement when she was far stronger and competent in the 1959 version? The only thing her 2014 self excelled at was casting cold glares. What was Disney's reason for diluting their most quintessential villain? Why subject her to basically an OOC fanfic that eliminated her savagery and reduced her from mighty achiever to scarred victim? Box office numbers, of course. The mouse knew contemporary viewers would be alarmed if a main character callously cursed a baby to die, but was also aware that devout fans of the Dark Fairy yearned to see her timeless malice in live action. The answer was to make her a pitiable underdog, yet allude in the advertisements that she was as venomous as ever. In the end, both sides saw it, and the result was $758 million worldwide. Why am I bringing up all of this? Because it's happening again. this time to another Disney woman of malignance, Cruella de Vil. Cruella is an egocentric who, upon learning that her ex-classmate's Dalmatian birthed a litter of pups, decides to purchase them and turn their pelts into a fur coat. Denied the canines, she hires 2 henchmen, Jasper and Horace, to steal them, along with 84 other puppies. Cruella will stop at nothing to see her morbid fur coat become a reality. The Cruella movie was announced on October 9th, 2015. Emma Stone was cast for the lead role, and Oh Hello on Broadway director Alex Timbers joined the production in December 2016. 50 Shades of Grey screenwriter Kelly Marcel will serve as writer. The film is set to open in 2018. There's an old adage, just because you can, doesn't mean you should. Disney's 7 live-action remakes have 2 things in common: whimsical and adventurous elements. The Alice series, Maleficent, Cinderella, Peach Dragon, and Beauty and the Beast center around fanciful topics. The Jungle Book includes talking animals and wilderness peril. Despite their variances, there's a feel of magic in them all. 101 Dalmatians is grounded in the realism of 1960s England, but the normality is offset with talking animals. It's unlikely talking animals will appear in the Cruella film, since Disney's other 101 Dalmatians live-action reboots opted to keep the animals mute. At least audiences will be swept up in mid-century England mise-en-scène, right? Wrong. It won't be set in the 1950s or 1960s, but the 1980s. This again? Disney did the same thing with the Peach Dragon remake. The excuse that time was to pander to the original fans who watched the original in the late 70s and 80s. The company assumes those folks would scramble to it for a nostalgia overload, which was proven incorrect, with the lowest ticket sales for a remake. 101 Dalmatians was released in 1961. Why not follow Peach Dragon's farcical logic and set it in the 1960s to draw back its introductory fans? 2 reasons: the prohibitive cost of making polished period pieces and latching onto the 1980s nostalgia trend. Why spend a large fee constructing sets and costumes that sweep viewers back to a bygone era when the filmmakers can just dress the actors in nondescript clothing and hairstyles and try passing those off as 1980s fashion, or film around modern skylines with a few old cars scattered around? Isn't it funny that the 2 reboots set in the 1980s are headed up by directors of small, obscure films and have the tiniest budgets for Disney remakes? Vintage theming has always been the mouse's mainstay for whisking people off to the regal, good old days of past. If they're going to remake these flicks, they should keep the yesteryear backdrop consistent. While Disney villains are some of cinema's most acclaimed, they shouldn't get full-length features. Allow me to elaborate. The Mouse House makes it their aim to create family-friendly content, and in today's world, that translates into playing it safer than ever before. It seems there can no longer be true miscreants in these reimaginings, only misunderstood outcasts. The villain isn't really all that bad, they just need love. She can't help what she did. Her heart was broken. What's peculiar is only the female characters are being redeemed. Gaston is still a brute, and Shere Khan meets his end. Stefan had a rough childhood, but he doesn't get a tragic villain exemption. Is this double standard suggesting women can't be malicious and are only reacting to heartache, but male villains mean business? While it's been a breeze retelling the protagonist's stories, the only villain-centric reboots thus far suffered a raw deal. Cruella sticks in people's minds because she's outlandish and horrid. But if Maleficent, Disney's most adulated villain, was downgraded into a pushover, there's no way Cruella will be unmodified. As much as Disney perpetrates this appeal to pity cliché, we're still left with the repulsive truth that Cruella's goal is to wear the stitched-together skins of 99 puppies as fashion. Even the most anguished defense attorney pin backstory can't legitimize such wanton barbarity. Therefore, the Cruella movie will take one of 3 routes. 1. Cruella experiences a tragedy and becomes somewhat intimidating, but later has a heel-face turn moment and saves the day. 2. Cruella experiences a tragedy and turns bitter, but only takes the dogs to study their fur patterns for faux fur. Horace and Jasper are the true big bads. 3. Cruella experiences a tragedy, but is only acting out of duress. Horace and Jasper are the true big bads. Maleficent followed option 1 and made a fortune, so it would seem natural for the Cruella movie to replicate it. Or the filmmakers may mix it up and go for number 3. Whichever path it chooses, it depicts Cruella in the beginning as a kind-hearted, shy, and clumsy Mary Sue who's new to the fashion industry. Everyone loves her, except the resentful boss who decides to make her time there miserable. The boss will order Cruella to create the perfect fashion. Cruella tries dazzling the boss, but the ideas are always rejected. Finally, Cruella snaps and starts designing over-the-top furs, which catapult her to instant fame in the fashion industry. It's here that the film will branch off into one of the 3 aforementioned paths. All 3 outcomes are inane. Censoring the threats to eliminate controversy and shoehorn in a happily ever after for all goes against why Disney villains have endured the test of time. 1959 Maleficent had remained relevant for 55 years before that 2014 atrocity appeared, proving how impressive she is as a villain. Even now, the animated version is the one most people remember and is still showcased on new merchandise. Contrary to what Disney believes, most audiences want to see the villain as much as they do the hero. One of the company's most profitable franchises is their villains line, so consumers clearly don't have a problem with these characters and their flagrancy. So why, pray tell, are they reimagining these foes as humane? If Disney feels they have to acquit their pre-existing fiends with contrived pathos and sanitized machinations, then perhaps those characters shouldn't be spotlighted. Will people want to watch this? It's a Disney remake, so naturally, its sales will pale in comparison to Beauty and the Beast and Maleficent's, because it lacks that enchantment appeal I mentioned. Just as with Maleficent, the fashionista's hallmark viciousness will be a selling point in the teaser trailer and posters, but the finished product will present her as a milquetoast anti-villain. What will critics think about it? They'll say it was a missed opportunity to really explore the diabolical fiend and plays it too safe by toning down her personality and never permitting her to go all out. Audiences will say it's okay, but far from the best remake. Was it a good idea to make this? With the rich repository of Disney films, it's puzzling as to why the 101 Dalmatians lore was chosen so early on for reboot treatment, especially when it was already remade in 1996 with a 2000 sequel. The Alice series, Maleficent, Cinderella, The Jungle Book, Peach Dragon, and Beauty and the Beast were superior contenders due to their cinematic and visual potential. 101 Dalmatians is on par with The Fox and the Hound and The Rescuers. They're classics, but lack the majesty and fantasy synonymous with the mouse's other tales. While Cruella de Vil is memorable, retelling another 101 Dalmatians variants, with the added saccharine sweet indoctrination of why we should pity the woebegone dog-napper, will feel like a warmed-over Maleficent clone. What will be the lasting impression? Scads of viewers voice their grievances over the languid nosedive Maleficent took, and the Cruella movie will evoke a similar rebuke, compounded by the fact that it'll be set in fairly contemporary times, and without the whimsy of talking animals will be additional detriments, and most people will ultimately prefer the original over this fanfiction wannabe. The classic Disney movies are based on rudimentary fairy tales with black and white morals. They're not meant to be psychological character studies. We don't wonder what trauma Chernenbog endured that drove him to terrorize the village. We're not meant to sympathize with the evil queen and her beauty fixation. We know who to boo as soon as 1961 Cruella saunters onto the screen. We're not saying, what ordeal did this poor woman sustain that make her want to take the lives of 99 puppies? Perhaps their cuteness will warm her heart. Give her a chance. We know she's good inside. Competent evildoers are crucial for successful storytelling. Imagine if Maleficent was missing from Sleeping Beauty. The fairies would present their gifts. Aurora would grow up in the castle, marry, and live happily ever after. How dull would that be? How many Disney reboots will push this dubious message of defending a villain's atrocities because they were heartbroken? Are all Disney villains going forward misunderstood outcasts who later rescind every wrongdoing they've ever committed? I was intrigued when I first saw the Maleficent teaser trailer. Based on Angelina Jolie's chilling performance in the christening scene, it makes me wonder how great the remake could have been had the character been allowed to remain a noble villain instead of a tsundere. Maleficent was the figurative toe in the water. If Cruella makes even $500 million, it'll convey to Disney that the masses approve of this trite, moralizing appeal to pity in exchange for a nostalgia rush, and they'll churn out more Villain Decay reimaginings that sacrifice established character integrity with mollycoddling rewrites, where everyone is good and everyone wins. If they want their new villains to present minimum threat, to each their own, I guess. Just leave the pre-existing foes be. If folks are adamant to learn about Cruella's past, instead of going to the cinema, they should just read a Cruella origin fanfic. It'll be no worse than the film, and it's free. Alright, next movie. No. Someone's got a gripe about it, and that someone is Marplotic.